we go. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by advertising such notice in the Home News Tribune, the Asbury Park Press, the Board Office, the schools, and on Cablevision 118 and Verizon Fios Channel 24, and by filing such notice with the Township Clerk. This meeting was scheduled for Tuesday, January 11th, 2022. The Board will take formal action on payment of bills and other agenda items. Mr. Mara?
Thank you, Ms. Lent. The Old Bridge Township Board of Education acknowledges that the law of this state establishes that members of the public, including members of the board, have the right to record public board meetings using audio or video recording devices, provided that that act of recording does not interfere with the business of this public board meeting. Therefore, the board makes it known that any such recording is to be considered the private recording of the individual and in no manner represents the official record of this board. The board therefore takes no responsibility for such private recording and completely disavows any future use.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Burns?
Present.
Ms. Callie?
Here.
Ms. DeCaro?
Here.
Mr. Giordano?
Here.
Mr. Marquetta?
Here.
Mr. Slade?
Here.
Mr. Silikowski?
Here.
Mr. Weber? And Ms. Lent? Here. Quorum exists.
Pledge of Allegiance, please. Everybody stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Nope, I will not. Ms. Lent. Mr. Giordano, just on behalf of the Vice President, we have executive orders. In fact, the old one is still in effect through tonight. You got to have your mask on. It's a state law at this point. Nobody has to like it, but it is enforceable, so you're going to have to put the mask on or leave the meeting.
Okay, I am not causing harm to anybody. I am not doing any damage to anybody. The executive power ended today. The legislator denied the governor's powers to continue, so I will not recognize the new state of emergency because state of emergencies do not last 2 years, and it is time to move on. Like I said, I'm not causing harm to anybody, so if the public wants me to leave, I will do that.
As a matter of law, the board needs you to. We cannot place the board in legal jeopardy. We have an obligation as an entity to enforce the law, regardless of whether it's right or wrong, whether we like it or hate it.
Okay.
So again,
But
I have to
it's-
ask you to either mask up or leave the meeting.
Okay, got it. I'll be at the council meeting where they do not require masks because there's no need to, and I wish the best of luck. I sent a resolution to the rest of the board about the quarantine requirements, how they shouldn't be placed on unvaccinated.
You got to head out.
Okay, got it. All right.
I'm sorry, Mr. Giordano. You were saying?
Will someone volunteer for the Code of Ethics, to read the Code of Ethics next week?
I will.
Mr. Cittadino? We'll turn it over to you.
At this portion of the agenda meeting, usually there's no superintendent's report, no progress towards goals as of yet. That'll be on the regular meeting. And then we go through correspondence. Mr. Mara, any correspondence?
No correspondence for this section of the meeting.
Okay. Reports for next week.
Any special committee reports for next week? No. Okay, then we'll open it to the hearing of the residents on any agenda item only. Okay, we'll close that portion.
Curriculum 1 and 2. just for
Okay,
discussion.
there's nothing for policy, curriculum 1 and 2 for discussion? No discussion? Okay. Athletics is next. We have a resignation for next week. Okay. And then moving on to finance. Any questions? Okay, can we have a motion on number 1? Finance?
Callie will move it.
Callie?
Carol, second.
To Carol. Okay. Any questions? Then roll call, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, separating the electric bills. Okay, number 6588, page 3, this is batch 1, I believe, and 1082, page 8. I'd like to separate these for discussion, please.
For discussion only, Mr. Solikowski, or for
Yes.
vote?
Discussion, yes. Not voting person, because what's going to happen, I have to pay the bills anyway. Okay, it seems over here on the first one, which is page 3, this is very reasonable. Gas heat for Old Bridge High School, 14,000, and Sandburg, which is probably the second largest building, which is 11,000. That's very acceptable, and the rest were all around $1,000 to $1,500 apiece for the gas. Then I go to this next page, which is page 8. In my curiosity, why do we have a duplicate bill over here? Did we not pay the bill for a month?
I'm not sure which one you're talking about on page 8. PSE&G?
Yes, 1082, page 8.
Okay, what happens is there's a bill, the utility bills are broken up into 2 pieces. One piece is the actual commodity, which is the first one that you referred to,
Go ahead.
and the second bill is for the delivery of the commodity to the facilities. So it used to be that both pieces were in one bill.
Right.
But in the last 10 or 15 years, we've been able to buy the commodity from a different supplier, but it still gets delivered by PSE&G or JCP&L.
Thank you for your answer.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Ms. Burns,
Yes.
Ms. Callie,
Yes.
Mr. Caro,
Yes.
Mr. Marqueta,
Yes.
Mr. Slade,
Yes.
Mr. Solikowski,
Yes.
and Ms. Lent.
Yes.
Resolution 1 passes.
Any discussion for items 2 through 8? Okay, moving on. Nothing for non-certificate personnel office or operational. Any discussion for non-certificate personnel other? Okay, moving on to certificated personnel action for 1 and 2. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll move it.
Burns will second.
Roll call, please.
So on resolutions 1 and 2, Ms. Burns,
Yes.
Ms. Callie,
Yes.
Mr. Carroll,
Yes.
Mr. Marqueta,
Yes.
Mr. Slade,
Yes.
Mr. Solakowski,
Yes.
Ms. Lent.
Yes.
Resolution 1 and 2 pass.
Any discussion for 3 through 28? Any discussion on,
Yes, Ms. Lent, I will go over the retirements next week, okay? Thank you.
any discussion for non-certificate personnel transportation? Any discussion for transportation? Any discussion for supplies, equipment, and services? Okay. One through. Any discussion for miscellaneous 1 through 6?
I'd like to ask a question about, on the miscellaneous number 1. Would it be possible to go back into the auditorium? To where it says the board location is in the Old Bridge High School main TV studio where we are now. Obviously, you can see it's a pretty packed room. So I would think it's not a terrible move to bring it back into the auditorium where people are more spaced out. So could we make a motion? Or make a motion to discuss next week?
I don't know if we need an actual motion to do it. We could probably do it administratively and have a discussion with the board president. And the reason we did move it back in here was the students are starting to do their activities, winter play and stuff like that, so the stage gets used.
Right.
And we don't want to interrupt their programs for us. So let me take a look at their schedule, see what's going on in there, see if whatever they're using it for has been completed or what.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just throwing it out
I
there.
understand the reason.
Yeah.
Moving on to board secretary and board business. Anything? Okay, opening up hearing of residents on any school district issue.
Okay, Ms. Lent, there were 3 emails that I received to the board secretary email address today prior to 12 o'clock. The first one is from Gina Lafferty, and I apologize if I misstate the name. This quote, "Silence in the face of tyranny is dangerous. There are too many injustices and discriminatory policies unfolding across this country. If speaking the truth makes people uncomfortable, they may want to do some self-reflection. Truth does not mind being questioned. A lie does not like being challenged. I find it very odd that we are no longer supposed to ask questions. Last I checked, science is all about asking questions. When science cannot be questioned, then it is no longer science. It is a political science. If you're on the side that is continually having to change their story, you might want to do some self-reflection. If you're on the side that is advocating the use of force, coercion, and stripping away individual rights, you may want to do some self-reflection. Follow your heart, follow your gut, listen to your instincts. Never let anyone intimidate or bully you into making a different choice. This is America. I will continue to stand for everyone's freedom to choose. I will continue to pray we can all unite for freedom, regardless of beliefs, for the sake of our children's future. Educate, not mandate. We are far past discussing the efficacy and appropriateness of a vaccine. This is not about being pro/anti-vaccine, but a stand for liberty, medical freedom, and privacy. You can be a pro-vaccine and anti-vaccine mandate. Every one of you take an oath to uphold the Constitution, so why is it that discriminatory actions for which you have the authority to not implement in our district is a clear case of not only medical, and in some cases, such as our family's religious discrimination, but is also a violation of Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations where, in Section 50.23 and 24, it is illegal to make anyone participate in an experimental program using coercion. You are clearly trying to coerce our parents to vaccinate their children with this vaccine that has only been approved for emergency authorization use in our children. This section of the code is how the U.S. has embraced the Nuremberg Code as used in Title 26 Health and Vital Statistics, Section 22:14-4. Quote, informed consent, unquote, means the authorization given pursuant to this act to participate in medical research performed on a subject after each of the following conditions has been satisfied, with the last condition being, quote, consent is given voluntarily and freely by the subject or his guardian or authorized representative without the intervention of force, fraud, deceit, duress, coercion, or undue influence, unquote. Terminating teachers, for example, is undue influence at a minimum. I again implore you to stop your acts of discrimination and coercion, as these are not only highly immoral in my view, but more so illegal. Under 18 U.S. Code Section 2331, inside of the definition of domestic terrorism is any time a U.S. citizen or government in the U.S. is forced to do something that it would not otherwise do. Each of you creating and implementing said policy, along with the most current NJDOH recommendation, are in clear violation of not only Title 21 CFR, but also 18 U.S. Code Section 2331, which is a felony that can carry heavy fines and prison time. I want to emphasize the word recommendations and guidelines. They are not laws. A mandate is not even a law. Merriam-Webster's dictionary meaning is to assign or administer something such as territory. Bills get voted on by politicians. Once again, we are talking political science. I encourage you to revisit and amend our current policy of coercion and discrimination, and to not adopt any further coercion and discrimination policies in the future. Governor Murphy's order tonight at 11:59 p.m. His plan for an extension was voted on, and that vote was no. 2 years later, we're still in this mess. Some would say we're almost back to where it started. Please stop the irrational and discriminatory quarantine. Stop the practice of sick until proven healthy. And most importantly, please free our children's smiles. Small policies may seem insignificant and easy enough to accommodate. This is by design, and I want every one of you to really think about this. If you were to throw a frog into a boiling water, he would jump out and fight for his life. But if we were to put him in warm water and slowly raise the temperature, he's boiled without a fight. Thank you to those who are recognizing the rising temperatures and for taking a stand against it." Unquote. The second one is from Darren Achatuli. Subject is questions for the BO meeting tonight. Number 1, was the superintendent contract renewed? If so, for how long, when, and where? Number 2, at 11:59 tonight, if I'm not mistaken, the masks on our children will go back to the districts. What will the board do if it is? Masks on, masks off, or mask optional? Number 3, where is the SEL curriculum that Frank asked the superintendent to provide, and where can we find it? I'll send you questions that are concerning to me that you sent to my 11-year-old daughter. I want them explained tonight. Number 4, how much money in debt is the BOE? How much do we owe and have to pay back? How do you plan on paying it back? Also explain to us parents the agreement that if you accept these funds, what does the district need to enforce to keep getting money or money already received? Number 5, I'm hearing that kids want to be involved in extracurricular activities, must be vaccinated. Is that true, and what will you do if it is? Thank you, Darren Achatuli. And then he's provided a picture of 2 items. I'm not quite sure where they came from. But again, here are the questions sent to my 11-year-old in Sandburg. I would like to see them all sent to me. And the first picture is, pick the choice below that you think is the best way to strengthen relationships among all diverse communities within Sandburg. And there are 3 items here. The first item, which has a dot on it, give students the opportunity to use their voice to share about their lifestyles, cultures, ethnicity, etc., and learn about each other. The next, without a dot, is provide structural programs to students that promote respect for people different from them and teach them about tolerance and celebrate diversity. And item number 3, which has no dots, is other. The next question is, how often do you see positive communication among other students? There are 2 responses. One has a dot, and it's often. The other, never. It's not dotted. And the third item on this page is, what type of awareness do you think is most needed in your school? And there's a dot next to lifestyle and sexuality, and I can't see anything beyond that. On the following page, what type of awareness do you think is most needed in your school? There are 4 items, none of them with dots. First one is lifestyle, sexuality, racial, religion, and other. And the final sentence is, I would like answers to what by his is, for, and all the questions sent without my consent. That's from Mr. Achatuli. The third email is from Lynette Rios. Subject is Executive Order 251 and 253, dated January 11, 2022. To school board members and school board attorney of Old Bridge, this letter serves as notice that the Executive Orders 251 and 253 expire as of midnight tonight, January 11, 2022. In multiple public board meetings, you stated that these orders require you to follow the mask mandate. While we have disagreed on that point, this was your basis for requiring masks on all students and staff. When those orders expire tonight, so does your requirement that all students wear masks. An elected school board is not legally allowed to require masks as a health measure because it does not have the authority to act in a medical capacity. A school board can only act within its scope outlined in the statute that govern it. Acting as a licensed medical professional is not within its scope. Even the executive order had to have the involvement of the Health Commissioner, Judith Persachilli, because she is a licensed medical professional, and it is within her legal scope. When you stated it was the executive order enforcing masks in our district, you acknowledged your understanding that you alone cannot require masks. A school board does not act and cannot act as a licensed medical organization. Therefore, masks are no longer required by executive order as of Wednesday, January 12th, and my children will be going to school without masks. As you also know, in order to enact anything, a school board must create a policy within legal bounds and pass a resolution, which requires public notice and public meetings. Should you choose to move forward acting as a medical professional and try to create a mask-required policy in the coming weeks, you will be met with legal action. I, along with other parents in the district, will immediately file in the Middlesex County Superior Court on the grounds that the school board has no legal authority and is acting outside the scope of its statutes. This will cost thousands in school dollars that you as a board will have to pay your board attorney to respond to every motion. If the state says that school districts have the power to decide for themselves the protocols and procedures for COVID, they only speak to what is within your legal bounds. Should the health commissioner recommend school children wear masks, that is all it is, a recommendation. A school board can then only recommend masks be worn, but they cannot require it. If for some reason Murphy declares another state of emergency and insists on masking again, the lawsuit against that has already been filed in the State Appellate Court docket number 2:21-CV-13271, of which I am a part. Sincerely, Lynette Rios. Thank you, Ms. Lunt.
Any other residents would like to speak? Sir? Go up to the podium, please. State your name.
Hi, Dmitry Kapchik. I have 3 boys in the district, one in elementary, middle, and high. So let's address the gorilla in the room. What are we doing about the masks? This is relentless. This isn't going anywhere. This is going to continue on and on and on. The governor is giving himself power. Never-ending power. Does the board officially, and I guess that's a question for the attorney, have the right to vote the masks out of school?
Give us all of your questions and comments, and then we'll try and answer everything.
Well, we can do one. Am I limited in time?
Yes, 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. So question number 1, whether or not us as the board, can we fight it? Number 2, whether or not you did your due diligence prior to today, figure out whether or not you're allowed to fight the mask mandate. And Governor Murphy is going to come out tomorrow to say, now we have to vax our kids. I'm not vaccinating my kids. There's no way in hell I'm vaccinating my kids. It's not going to happen. I don't know about you guys, but it's just not going to happen. So, I mean, that's pretty much, I'm totally, totally against masks. I will go away if the masks go away. So, I guess I will reach out to that woman that sent an email, and I will get something going to get these masks off our kids. When you started this procedure, I mean, this is the first time I visit something like this. I didn't even know who was talking. I didn't know that guy's name. Somebody was talking. I couldn't figure out who was talking. And I'm an adult. I'm 43. What do you think the kids are feeling? It's wrong. Thank you.
Andrew Lewis, question for Mr. Parton through the Vice President. I understand that the governor did extend the mandate today. If you could possibly explain what happened today, and then what the procedure is if the district doesn't follow it, or if any employees or students of the district don't follow the mandate.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll close this portion to the public. He's going to answer.
We,
Sir, he's
that's
gonna
what we're
do
doing.
that. We close the session, and then we answer the questions that were asked.
Right.
It's in the guidelines. It's called a public comment. It's a public comment section, not a back and forth. It's not a debate, no.
We're going to address everything you raised. Okay. So this afternoon, as everybody read, the governor had looked as of January 1st to extend his emergent authorities, including, for purposes of our discussion, the mask mandate in schools and the vaccination or test mandate for school employees. That required a joint or a concurrent resolution from the two houses of our state legislature. That did not happen. It was made very clear that it was not going to happen. The governor asked for an alternative 45-day extension. Both houses refused to even vote on that. So this afternoon at 3-something, the governor produced two new executive orders, Executive Order 280 and Executive Order 281. Executive Order 280 extends or renews the public health emergency, which is a statewide trigger for certain executive powers. Again, focusing on what we're all here to deal with. For purposes of school districts, Executive Order 280 authorized Executive Order 281, stay with me now, and Executive Order 281 expressly extends the two executive orders that you're asking about, that Mr. Lewis was asking about, and that we have been dealing with, and that we're all dealing with here tonight. As of now, the midnight tonight expiration of Executive Order 251 regarding masks and of Executive Order 253 regarding vaccine or test for adults working in schools will not expire. It will be extended. There is no expiration date on how long it's going to be extended for. As soon as we know, we'll tell you. But as of right now, the governor's executive orders say the mask mandate and the vax or test mandate stay in place. As far as your follow-up question of can we choose not to abide by it, and as far as Mr. Lewis's same question of what happens if a teacher or a parent or a board member or anyone else says we're not doing that. The answer is found in the last paragraph of Executive Order 251, 253, 280, and 281. They all end the same way. Unfortunately, the way they all end is anybody who fails to enforce, implement, and honor the terms of this executive order will be guilty of a disorderly person's offense and may be fined up to, I believe it's $1,000, and jailed for up to 6 months. As a public agency, the board is obligated by the paragraph before that to enforce and implement all terms of every executive order. Ms. Rios's letter that was read right before you came up, it cites section 2214 about the non-consensual testing and non-consensual medical procedures. That does not apply, and you heard us discuss this at the October meeting. That does not apply to the vaccination requirement because it is approved for the people for whom it is required. There is no statewide vaccine mandate for children. It is available, but it is not required. It is not required in the Old Bridge Public Schools for any students. So the statute that was cited in 2214 is not applicable. It is not experimental drug treatment or experimental drug testing. The chapter immediately before that is 2213, which expressly says that an executive order by a seated governor has the force of law in the state of New Jersey. Getting back to my discussion with Mr. Giordano at the beginning of this meeting, I did not want to have that discussion. No one wants to have that discussion. Most people don't want to wear a mask. Most people don't want circumstances to exist in which masking is required. I think we all probably agree on that. Yes. Write to your legislators, write to your governor. But, like the speed limit on Route 516 out there, we can't tell you don't worry about it. We can't tell you that this state law, which was renewed 5 hours ago, is something that we can allow you to ignore on our property. You think I wanted to ask a board member to leave this meeting? That's a terrible thing to do. Yes, there are. Of course there are. This is a pretty even debate. But it doesn't matter what I want. What I want is to tell my client, for better or for worse, whether they like it or not, what the law requires them to do. My client is the Board of Education. No. The Board of Education is 9 people who are elected as educators, not along party lines. They're all here for the betterment of the students in the school district. I have heard rumors about that. There are no, well, they are not free to do that. Not yet. But let me tell you this way. If Ms. Lent here asked me if she could drive 75 on Route 516, I would tell her, don't do that, it's against the law. Now, she might not get caught, but it is against the law. And my advice to the board is based on what does the law say. For better or for worse. I'm not saying you need to like it or that I do. But Executive Order 281 expressly requires masking in schools for the time being. We all want that to go away. There's no question about that. But, okay, you don't want it to go away? Okay. I think we all want it to go away. We want the conditions underlying it to go away as well. But as of right now, that is the law. And compliance with the law is something that I have to advise my client to do. What I have told them is that is what the law says. Will you get caught is not really my job to analyze, and that is really not the board's right, that's not the board's discussion to have, is would we get caught. No, they do not have the right. That language that I read you from the end of this executive order, it expressly says you have to comply, you have to implement it, and you have to enforce it. So no, the board, and this is a big question, a lot of school districts, including this one, have written to Trenton and said, give us the independence to make this decision, to join, to not join, to make it a little different, and that has not happened. It is a state mandate. This board does not have the option of saying, let's not do that. No. This is on pages 13 and 14 of Executive Order 281, which is dated today. It is not my opinion. It is my advice, but I'm not making it up. I'm reading it from state law. And I don't... Excuse me? The mayor does not have the right, the council does not have the right to ignore any law. Yes.
Okay, with that, we're closing the hearing of
Unless Mr.
residents.
Cedeno had anything to add. I think the student athlete question.
There was an email. I don't remember all of it, so I'll just, it's up to you as the representation of the board if you want to discuss my contract. The question was the superintendent's contract renewed? If so, how long, when, where?
There has been no action to renew the superintendent's contract as of this time. There was a notification deadline per Mr. Citadino's contract that by the end of August he was to be notified if his contract would not be renewed. He was not notified of that. So as of right now, Mr. Citadino's current contract still expires on June 30th of this year, and no new contract is in place at this time yet. That is a question for the board, and it's something the board will be discussing in executive session because it is a matter of personnel. Not tonight. I'm going to answer that, but through Mrs. Lent, let me just clarify, this isn't it's not a press conference, and I understand what you're doing. You're asking logical follow-up questions, but really we take all the questions and try and answer them all. And no, there was not a reason given. Ms. Burns, as the board vice president, the board president at the time had a conflict and could not be involved in discussions, simply notified the superintendent that he was not being non-renewed. I know that's a double negative. That's, again, what the statute says. So that is the answer to that question.
It was Mr. Carroll who was conflicted. Ms. Burns was the one who sent me the letter.
Ms. Burns sent the
Right.
letter because the board
Right.
president at
Right,
the
I'm
time
s- yes,
was
I'm sorry. Yes.
conflicted, yeah.
Just to clarify, there was a discussion.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I would just urge Mr. Achatuli to reach out to me via email. My name is Joseph Mara, and I can discuss with him the, whatever the debt values are that the district has and how it manages to pay those debts.
There was a question related to the SEL curriculum. Where is the SEL curriculum that Frank, I'm assuming he means Mr. Weber, asked the superintendent to provide? The information that Mr. Weber asked was not about the SEL curriculum. Mr. Weber had already received the SEL curriculum, I believe, in September. This was question about the access to all curriculum items and how the public can have access to all curriculum items. And because of the work of our staff, the entirety of all of the curriculum is on the district website, where anyone can go and look at the district curriculum, pre-K to 12. So that is inclusive of the SEL programs that are there. There's a question about if kids want to be involved in extracurricular activities, they have to be vaccinated. The Department of Health, not the Department of Education, as we saw this wave in increased viruses and contraction of COVID in the month, end of December to the beginning of January, the region turned back to red, according to the Cali score. And if you remember the Cali scores, it told what school districts must do as you change from yellow to orange related to the number of positive cases within that region. In this situation, we did turn back to red. Now, previously, if you turned to red, the direction was the schools were to go to remote. It's obvious, and this district and this staff has done a great job in keeping the schools in person through their dedication and commitment to it. Hard work by everyone. I think in Middlesex County we are the longest now of one or two districts that have been in person for the longest amount of time. And we're almost a year since we're back in the schools, and 7 months since everyone is back in schools in person consistently. And I think that's what everybody wants to do, whether districts did that or not. And the Department of Health took away the red where it says automatically go remote, and they gave some recommendations of what you could do. There's a difference between guidelines and suggestions. So some of the suggestions were you do a test to stay option, whereas you get the consent from the parents to test their children, and through regular testing, and if they're close contact, you can test them and have them stay. Seeing where we are with the conversation with masks and how that goes over so well, I don't think we're in a place where the majority of this that would make an impact would consent to have their children tested in school. So it was not something we entertained. What would happen is the people who are probably vaccinating their children and having them wear masks are the ones who are going to sign the consent, and the others wouldn't. And it wouldn't allow us to do anything to keep the schools open any longer. So we didn't go with that suggestion. Another suggestion was to mandate any student doing extracurricular activities has to be vaccinated. I've said to the board members before, I'm for vaccinating as many people who want to be vaccinated. That is why this district has had more vaccination clinics than anyone. But I'm not for forcing anyone to be vaccinated. You should have the options. So our staff has the option. If they don't want to be vaccinated, we provide the testing for them. I've been running testing out of my office Monday through Friday for anyone who's just symptomatic, because I think it's smart to know. If you want to come home to your family, you want to see people, it's good to know if you're positive. So we believe in that. But we're not believing in mandatory vaccinating our students, that's for sure, and we did not entertain that, and we won't be entertaining that as a suggestion from the Department of Health. I think there was one more question. Oh, it's the survey questions. So those survey questions come from the directive of the Department of Civil Rights under the Attorney General's office. So school districts are selected through whatever the process Department of Civil Rights has to make sure that every student of varying background, race, religion, gender identity, has the ability to make sure that the district, their exact words, has awareness of them. So that every child, for their own mental health, feels that my district is aware that I exist, and they know how I feel, and they know that I'm important as a person. And they ask us to survey our students to make sure that we know that we're aware of them, and if we're not, if they feel as though we're not aware that they exist, that we do something to address that awareness. Not for that individual child, but overall, as a community school guideline. So that is why they exist, and they exist at the direction of the Department of Civil Rights. I know that Mr. Parton and I have talked about our DCR requirements in the past.
Yes.
And the Attorney General does not really fool around on those type of things.
No, the Attorney General's mandates through the DCR are enforced statewide, not just in schools.
And I think that was the conclusion of those questions. So again, if anybody wants to see more about that or wants to see the SEL curriculum, it's online. If you want it sent to you, you can always email my office and I can send it directly to you. Thank you.
Thank you, the both of you, for answering those questions. Like Mr. Cittadino just said, if you do have any further questions, please feel free to email his office. And with that, we'll close the hearing of the residents and move on to old business.
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr.
No,
Silver.
no.
Under old business, I would just like to ask Mr. Parton for clarification on the old school board code of ethics, letter E. I will recognize that authority rests with the Board of Education. Can we clarify that first sentence?
Yeah, I believe that the sentence that you're reading from continues that no Board of Education member should make any individual promises or take private action that would compromise the board. So what it means is you are a body of 9. To take action, you need 5 votes, assuming 9 people are here. And it means that it's a group. Does that answer your question?
No, I was trying to get to what authority rests within the board. Who makes the board holds the power over the superintendent, correct?
In most circumstances, yes. There are some things that are reserved to administration, but the board sets policy for the school district within the confines of law, and the board is certainly the top of the table of organization. So you are the top authority in the school district.
Correct. So we would create a motion to set a policy, and then the policy would either get voted in or get made out.
As long as the policy is not contrary to any law or anything like that, then yes, the board can and does set policy, usually through its policy committee. I don't know if Mr. Weber has set the committees yet.
I haven't had a conversation.
Yes, the board absolutely sets policy.
Okay. All right. So then on top of the board is the parents, correct? The taxpayers?
The taxpayers are above everybody, yes.
And then the attorney works for the board, who in turn works for the taxpayers.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, old business. Yes, I guess about a meeting and a half ago, I asked the administration to let me know what happened and why the auto shop lifts were not repaired, as the teacher put the paperwork in, I believe, last September. One lift went out in September, another went out in October, the third went out when, I don't know when, but over a year and a half, these lifts should have been repaired last September or October. These kids are, better yet, this program is running at 40% efficiency. If that happened in industry, they would be bankrupt, closed down. If the lights went out in here, we would repair them. And yet, this administration did not look at this program. I'm very disappointed in this administration, and I want an answer, Mr. Parton. I'm leaving it up to you, because I asked them to give me answers, and they didn't give them to me. Thank you. Next week, give me the answers.
I second that from Mr. Silikowski.
Yes, go ahead.
That is So you are referring this to administration?
I'm referring this to administration.
I
If
heard you
they
do
don't-
it.
If they don't respond to me, you have to respond to me.
I can tell you that you and Mr. Marqueta have now asked the superintendent to look into it, and he is obligated to do so because, as Mr. Marqueta just reviewed, you are the Board of Education. You have asked for information. It may not be public, but yes, your request has been publicly made and publicly received.
I mean, I have 250 kids in there are being punished by this administration because they overlooked it. And yet they hired a French teacher for 2/3 or 2 periods because it's an academic program. These kids are being thrown under a bus by this administration as far as I'm concerned. If I wasn't here, these programs wouldn't be here.
You got the inquiry, Mr. Cittadino?
Yes, I do. I believe, Mr. Maurer, do you have any response to that? You had a...
If
yeah,
you'd
you
like
have-
me to go into it, I
Okay.
will.
Please do. I thought the information was furnished to Mr. Solikowski, and there's a lot of information related to that he's not relating it to the public.
Okay, so I'll give you the chronology of the auto shop lift. So on September 25th of 2020, an email was sent to the facilities manager advising that there was a problem with the lift. On October 8th, 2020, based on the condition of the lift, we were required to notify the architect to evaluate the method to be used to repair it. On October 13, 2020, the architect came and met with the facilities manager and the teacher. And on October 16th, a design services proposal was sent to the facilities manager. And this was during the school year. So on January 15th, Mr. Tricomi, the facilities manager, met with me, Joseph Maurer, the business administrator, and discussed the project, and it was not practical to do the repair during the school year. So we decided to do it over the summer. And on February 16, 2021, in-person learning returned to the district. So there were students in the class. Again, it was not practical to do the repair during that time period. On June 29th, the purchase order was sent to the architect to replace the lift during the summer of 2021. The architect received the purchase order on July 7, 2021. On July 13th, there was a meeting scheduled with the architect, the facilities manager, and the teacher to survey the equipment again. The meeting was canceled due to the unavailability of the teacher. On October 14th, on October 15th, through the 19th, the architect, through August 19th, the architect evaluated the entire project, put together a plan, and there was a Zoom meeting to discuss the project with the facilities manager, the teacher, and based on the review and the suggestion of the teacher, changes to better allow for students to congregate with more room around each car was suggested. In order to do this and confirm that the replacement was necessary to relocate the lifts, we needed to go back out and survey the overhead piping and potential obstructions. On August 24, 2021, the architect went out and did a field measurement to modify the overhead piping as a result of the requested changes. From August 25th, 21 to August 28th, the architect made the adjustments to the plans, and these adjustments required submitting these changes to the lifts to the Department of Education. On August 30th, on August 30th, the plans were approved by all parties. On September 2nd, we attempted to have the lift repaired so that it would be operational. However, that was not possible. On September 23rd, 2021, another Zoom call took place with the teacher based on the review of the teacher and the suggested additional changes to allow for additional vehicles to be located in the shop. which impacted the layout and requires some heating piping and heaters to be removed. A third trip to refine the plan with the teacher was set up. That's again in September 2021. On September 28th, the architect met with the teacher to discuss the layout. At that point, they mentioned repairing the existing lifts, which was not able to be accomplished. On September 29th, the layout was finally approved. On October 1st, the application, the final approved application, or the final design was approved by all parties and was submitted to the DOE for approval. On October 20th, 2021, the forms were submitted to them for approval. On 11/29, the BOE resolution was approved. And where we are today is on next Wednesday, the manufacturer will be installing the new lift. All approvals have been approved by the state, but this was not just a simple repair. It required, it was much more detailed than what we originally thought. And it could not be done while the students were there.
Totally unacceptable, your
And with the
response.
accommodation,
Sorry.
with the accommodation of the teacher, the students will be relocated during the time period where the repair will begin next Wednesday.
Thank you for your response. Totally unacceptable. These lifts should have been repaired when the kids were not in the building, because in the beginning you said that they did not repair them because the kids were in the building. But last year the kids weren't in the building. Why weren't they repaired? I'm sorry, unacceptable. You people are trying to cover it up. Somebody screwed up, okay? That's the way it works.
Any other old business? Any new business?
I have some new business. First, I would like to make a motion for the board to put on the agenda for next week to rescind Board Policy 2425.
Explain that policy.
Well, let's let Mr. Marqueta finish what he was saying first.
No, I have others here, but for that, just for the first one.
Which policy is that?
Policy 2425 is the one that gives Mr. Cittadino the authority to implement all remote learning in the cases schools get shut down. I personally don't feel that one person should have all that power. I believe as a board of 9 people, we can come up with a formidable plan to do it. If that does happen again, I hope it won't. But in that case, I believe that we should be the ones to make that determination, considering we are representing the taxpayer, and that's basically what I think a lot of people had a problem with last year.
That is a question for the board. I can tell you as far as the legal structure this year, which is different than last year, because of course it is. Right now, the superintendent does not have the authority to move to a remote platform.
No, I understand that part. The part that I would like either rescind the entire 2425, or if we want to revise it, I'll work with people to revise it. But I think that that should be something that the entire board should have power over. So it states clearly in their second page of the second paragraph about the, I want to say the 10th line in there, gives the superintendent the authority to implement a remote learning program in the case schools go virtual. I think we were elected to do our job, and that would be part of our job, considering we have policies that are for curriculum and so on and so forth.
I think that as far as the procedure goes, and if the board wants to take a look at that, that's fine, of course. As far as the procedure goes, you should refer that to the policy committee and go through that process. I don't know, again, I don't know who the committee members are. But if you want to make a motion for the policy committee to review it with administration and see if we can make changes and then bring it to the whole board for a discussion of it, certainly you can do that.
So we can't just rescind it? We can't make a motion to rescind?
To rescind a policy, your committee process, as Mrs. Rios said, you operate within policies within legal limits. You set up a policy structure, and I don't mean you.
That's
but
fine.
This
I
board
understand.
has a policy structure with committees. So it is not illegal for you to simply rescind a policy.
Okay.
You can see if you have a motion and a second and 5+ votes to do that, or 4+ votes tonight
Mhm.
to do that. But it is, normally it would go through a policy committee process and come back to the board with, here's how we could make it better. And then the board would have the authority to say yes or no to that.
So tonight we would need 4 votes.
Only because there's 7 people here.
Understood. No, I understand. I was just clarifying, that's
Yes.
all.
Yes.
Okay, so can we make a motion on that?
You are making a motion on that.
Okay,
So your motion is to review it, or to rescind it, or to revise it?
All right, so here, okay, so how about we do this? Instead of, you know what? No, let's rescind. I want to make a motion to rescind 2425.
Can I ask Mr. Parton a question?
Yes, sir.
So let's say that outside of COVID, we had, and I know this is in review of legislation now, we had a Hurricane Sandy type situation within the next month before any policies there, and the schools had to operate remotely. If the policy is rescinded and not revised, the students in the district could not learn because there'd be no policy for them to operate remotely.
Sorry, you are required to have a remote education plan that is outside of your board policy and outside of your administrative regulations. It's required to be submitted by the superintendent to the Commissioner of Education. That plan's got to be in place no matter who is triggering it, which is in this year is the Department of Health. As far as the board policy, the piece of paper itself, it is not required to be there. The authority for emergency administration, just like day-to-day administration, lies with the superintendent. The policy itself, if the board wants it gone, that is a question that the board can certainly raise. But remote education plans are between the administration and the state administration, meaning the Commissioner of Education.
But my question is, if something like that happened and there was no policy to implement it, would I have the authority to do so without convening an entire board meeting to say, there's no learning platform, we have to have the students operate remotely? Or is it nothing happens because there's no policy to operate it?
You would operate not under a policy at that point. You would operate under your remote education plan, but of course you would do that in communication with the board. But as far as emergent actions, if there were, God forbid, another Hurricane Superstorm Sandy situation, yeah, that would operate under your remote education plan, which is filed with the Commissioner of Education. So removing the policy would not leave you in a situation of we can't educate anybody. It would be a form and a communication protocol change, but it would not mean that you could not provide remote education if another horrendous situation took place.
Understood. Because currently they're looking at legislation that, well, I think this exists currently now, that if there's a state of emergency related to a storm and it's in excess of 3 days, the district can operate remotely. I just don't want to make sure that if we have a 12-inch snowstorm and it affects the district for 3 days, that our students don't have the opportunity to learn remotely while other districts continue to operate during those situations.
As of right now, in an emergency situation for the board and for the superintendent, if there were a blizzard that shut school for 3 or more days, you would have the authority under the remote education plan approved by the commissioner, which is in place, to activate remote education in consultation with the board, but you would be the point person on that, regardless of this board policy. So Mr. Marchetto's motion is, there's nothing illegal about it. You can make it, and you can see if there's a second, and the board can vote on it.
Okay. So now, just a quick question. So that plan that the superintendent has to submit to the state, does the Board of Education have a say in how that would work primarily? Like, would we have, so that would just be the superintendent's plan, and then he would submit it, or does it get approved through the board? How does that work?
The remote education plan would not get approved by the board. Similarly to fire drills, you acknowledge that they took place, but they're operated by the administration. They're operated by the principals and the teachers.
Do we
So
get,
it is one of those, you were talking about the code of ethics before, it's one of those, the day-to-day operation
Mhm.
mechanisms.
Okay.
Obviously, with a COVID remote learning situation, hopefully never again.
I hope so,
But
I hope
when we're
so.
talking about a blizzard, which is more common, more often than every 100 years, that is something that needs to, the superintendent in every district can deal with. What do we do? It's snowing. Do we close schools? That's the easy one-day question.
Right.
Or there is a 12-inch snowstorm, as Mr. Cittadino said, and followed by ice. Roads are going to be impassable until a week from now. What do we do in the meantime?
Mhm.
That would be an administrative action, because that's how did the schools operate today?
Okay.
I know that's a
understood.
long answer. Does it
It's a
answer
good
your-
answer. Again, I'd just like to have the dialogue,
Okay.
just so we're on the same page.
So your motion remains in place?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Ms. Lent, you need to see if we have a second on Mr. Marqueta's motion.
Do we have a second on his motion?
I second it.
Discussion? No, discussion.
Discussion?
I don't understand the motion.
Yeah,
We were going back and forth.
I
Do
don't
we want to
understand.
rescind it? Do we want to discuss it?
No, I said rescind.
It is, we operate under a committee platform where policies go through the committee, and all board members are welcome to attend those committee meetings, and then it's brought before the board regardless of how many board members attend the committee meeting. Also, we're voting on rescinding a policy, and we're a little at a disadvantage because policy's not in front of us.
Exactly. I agree.
So I don't have a problem discussing it, bringing it, and coming to an agreement and maybe, tweaking it or adjusting it. But I think that asking the board to vote on rescinding it, we're basically voting in the dark here.
The policy was just voted on last month.
Okay?
You should know it.
Mr.
Yes,
Marqueta,
I
you're-
have the entire policy memorized. I do.
Yes.
Do you?
I believe you. I'm not
Oh,
saying you don't,
okay.
but I just wanted to get clear. Okay, it's fine. I'm sorry. I apologize.
just to
Thank you.
clarify, timing-wise, is your motion to simply rescind tonight, or to put a motion to rescind on next week's action agenda?
Put a motion to rescind on next week's agenda.
Mr. Marqueta, can you, I'm just unsure, can you just explain your reasonings and your rationale for this, for wanting to rescind this again? I'm not sure if I understood you when you said it the first time.
That's fine, no problem. Basically, I believe, so in 2425, it states, again, second paragraph of the second page states that the superintendent has authority to implement the remote learning program. And I feel that we as a board should be the ones to pass that, or at least come up, because we have the curriculum policies, and I'm not trying to say that the superintendent doesn't know what he's doing. Apparently, obviously he does. He's been superintendent. But I'm just trying to let us have some power. That's what I'm going for here. So I don't think that the one person should hold that type of power to have that.
I believe, if I'm not, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Cittadino, but you usually don't just singularly make these decisions, do you? You usually make them in concert with discussions with the county superintendents, superintendents in the district, in the county, and, direction from Department of Health. It's not just a singular, you wake up one morning and make a decision. Am I correct? This is something that you discuss with your team, with your administrative team, and it's not a decision that you would ever come to lightly. Am I correct?
Agreed. That's probably, the hardest decision I've had to make in 25 years in education, but it wasn't done like it's being portrayed here, that I sat in my home and made this decision. We had a task force, whether you like the task force. I didn't know many of the parents on the task force prior to them being on there, and the parents were on there. Three members of the Board of Education were on there. So the board did have representation in the decision. The parents had representation in the decision. You know, we've had this back and forth. The staff had representation. There's an excess of 20 people on there was two task force, the remote learning task force and the back to school task force. The back to school one decided, you know, when it was safe and what conditions, which schools would be open and operating. The remote learning task force operated as how to improve remote learning to make it better for the learners at home, to get the best delivery of education from students, from the staff. Obviously, you know, and I said it from the beginning that there's no replacement for in-person learning. There's never going to be an replacement for in-person learning, especially pre-K to 12. So that is how it took place. It wasn't done by anyone in isolation. But, you know, I would just advise, you know, if I can make a recommendation to the board, is to follow the committee policy, because if you're asking that the people are the ones who are over the board, you're making a decision without having a policy committee the public can attend. You're just making a decision as board members without saying, how does the public feel about changing this policy or rescinding this policy? It's doing what you're expecting them you're not to do.
So I would like just to add a little to this also. I know a lot of friends of mine were negatively affected by remote learning, and by no means do I feel that anyone on this administration is sitting home thinking, how can we mess up these children's education system? I was not here last month when it was all voted on, so I would like an opportunity just to refresh myself in the policy. And I think that it's good to move it forward as a discussion, but just to erase it, not so much. I think that we should discuss it and either tweak it or formulate a better plan or put something else in place of it, rather than just rescinding it without a plan to go forward. That's just my 2 cents.
Okay,
Agreed.
so I was not suggesting that the superintendent was sitting at home coming up with ways to control the district. I never insinuated that. My motion to rescind was only to give the board back the power. That's all it was. That's strictly it. If you want to revise it, I'm open to revising it, to have a discussion, getting the board and the public on board as to what it entails. And then if we want to vote on it at a later date, I'm open to making that as well.
So do you want to?
So
then-
do you want to change it then to a discussion item next week rather than rescinding?
If that makes everybody else comfortable, I will compromise and meet in the middle, and I'll do it that way. So that's fine.
You got my vote then.
So you're asking to open it for discussion and refer to the policy committee? Do both at once?
Yeah.
All right, so
Yes.
that's your revised motion?
Yes, sir. That's
Mr.
my revised
Sorokowski,
motion.
do you still second the revised motion then?
I will still second it, yes.
Any other discussion?
But Lisa, you did a good job with that one. Just let's look at it and see where we can go with this. Thank you.
I look for your approval, Matt. Thank you. Any other discussion? Anybody else want to discuss this?
I just want to make sure that we're clear. So as I said before, now we're going to put this in the policy committee meeting for discussion,
We're moving it forward as a discussion item. We're just going to discuss it.
to bring it to committee, correct?
It's both. There's going to be discussion and it's going to be referred to the policy committee.
Okay.
I have a separate item that I'd like to discuss, but I think it was old business. I'm very sorry.
We still have to vote on Mr. Marqueta's motion.
Sorry, I
we didn't
jumped
see
the
this
gun.
through yet.
Okay.
Okay, so we're voting to just present this policy 2425 at next week's meeting under policies.
And to
For
refer
discussion.
to the policy committee.
Okay, but for next week's meeting, there'll be a resolution just to discuss this under
It'll
policies.
just be listed for discussion.
Okay. So, Ms. Burns,
Yes.
Ms. Callie,
Yes.
Mr. Carroll,
Sure, yes.
Mr. Marqueta,
Yes.
Mr. Slade,
Yes.
Mr. Mr. Sulikowski?
Yes.
Ms. Lent?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes.
So I believe it was the last December meeting, Mr. Weber had asked us to provide information for curriculum meetings and policy meetings, and we have agendas that go out now for the board for those meetings. Are those also available to the public?
I'm sorry.
I mean, whoever wants to answer.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I was
It was the December meeting, our last meeting of last year, that it was brought up that information be more available to the public. And I know that we have agendas for our meetings. I was wondering if those agendas are available to the public?
Yes, action agendas are available prior to the meeting, normally within 48 hours. Like, if the meeting's on Tuesday, usually they go public on Monday at 12 o'clock.
I was speaking about committee meetings.
Committee meetings, if the committee chairperson gives us an agenda, it gets published with the advertise or prior to the meeting.
Okay, and sometimes we have presenters. Is there a way to get the material that is going to be presented out with that agenda?
It's really up to the chairperson. If the chairperson wants us to do that, we will do whatever you direct us to do, provided we can do it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other new business?
Yes, I have a question. Is there any way, only because the gentleman earlier had a little Q&A, to change the format of the hearing of the residents? I understand it's the residents speaking and then the board can address, but I think it's good dialogue when back and forth. And a lot of times comments come out from a resident, and sometimes they'll leave the podium and nothing's addressed. So if it's possible to even change the format of hearing of the residents to make it more of a discussion, I mean, I know not a press conference, but just to have somewhat of a dialogue, because sometimes you ask a question, we respond, they have follow-ups, if that's doable. Just to change the format.
It is legal to do that. The way that it's set up now, what is required is that you have public comment. If a board chooses to have back and forth or to extend the time that any individual has, that is completely within the discretion of the board. So the answer to your question is yes. Again, you might want to take that to the policy committee because that would change your. There's a policy on everything, but there's a bylaw on how committee meetings are run. There's a bylaw on how your board meetings are run, and that is within the discretion of the board to change.
So we should just bring that up at to the policy committee to amend that.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other new business?
I have another one. Sorry. So regarding the guidance from the NJDOH that was released on December 30th, 2021, regarding the banning of the unvaccinated students and staff from any extracurricular activities, I would like to create a policy basically saying that we will not allow that to happen.
I'm sorry, Mr. Marqueta, can you repeat that?
So the NJDOH came out with a recommendation on December 30th, and they want to, their recommendation is to ban, basically discriminate against any unvaccinated staff or player, or student, thank you, yeah, student. So my motion would be to create a policy, or to vote on a policy for next week's meeting to basically protect that from not happening, where we can not allow that to happen, considering that it's only a recommendation.
Dave, is that currently an Old Bridge practice?
No.
Yeah, I didn't say, again, no accusations.
No, no.
I'm not accusing.
I think he's leading
no.
to the next point of his
I'm
question.
just trying to
sorry.
figure out where we stand, because if that was something that was happening now,
Right.
we need to know that.
It's hard to make a because I'm thinking how you're thinking. It's hard to make a policy for something that yet doesn't exist. So, to say the policy to be specific to something that doesn't exist how would you do that?
Well, it exists, but it's just, it hasn't come to peak yet. So I'm trying to be proactive in a way, where trying to prevent that from happening.
Yeah. In the absence.
I mean, it is, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt, I don't want to cut anybody off, but it is clearly a recommendation from the NJDOH. And it's, you know, it's gone out, and, you know, Sayreville voted against it, and I think we should do the same thing. I think we should create a policy to not allow that to happen. Considering, I understand that.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, that's
Mr.
fine.
Marqueta, I don't think Sayreville did a policy. They actually just put something on their agenda saying, we're not going to do that.
Okay, so can we do that?
You can if that's the will of the board. So we could, if you want to make a motion to add that to next week's agenda, again, same process.
Yes,
Make
I would
that
like to make a motion to do that. So, thank you.
Do we
Would-
have a
would-
second?
I'll second it again.
Would then he work with your office, Mr. Parton, to come up with the language for that resolution?
Yes.
Any discussion on it? Matt? Okay, roll call.
So just so I'm clear, so what are we're voting to put a resolution relating to the New Jersey Department of Health recommendations next week?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Burns?
Wait, I'm sorry, I have a question. So what we're voting on is to have Mr. Parton draft a resolution. We're not voting on a resolution. And then the resolution has to be voted on.
We're voting to put a resolution on the agenda next week. Whatever it is will be determined by Mr. Parton and Mr. Marqueta between now and then. That's my understanding.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with that.
And this is to not ban,
To not exclude unvaccinated staff or students from extracurricular activities.
So it's basically a resolution saying we're not going to do what we don't do.
No, yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
yes, 100%. But again, it's just taking the step to protect them. In the case something does happen and something does change, I would like that just to protect them, basically. So in the case, again, not that I'm not saying it's going to, but just in the case that it does.
Roll call. Ms. Burns?
Yes.
Ms. Callie?
Yes.
Mr. Carroll?
yeah, sure.
Mr. Marqueta?
Yes.
Mr. Slade?
Yes.
Mr. Solikowski?
Yes.
Ms. Lent?
Yes.
The resolution passes.
Okay, anything else?
I have two more. So we'll go with the lesser of two evils right now. Can we rebid for the company that controls the lunches for the schools? Can we put that out to be bid on? I know I'm not polished like Mr. Dunn or anybody else that was previously on the board or currently on the board. I know I'm not as polished as them. I appreciate you guys bearing with me. I'm, again, just looking out for the district, trying to make things better, because I do know that some kids do go home hungry because they don't like the lunch. Some kids break their braces on a chicken nugget that's previously frozen and not unfrozen. Moldy pizza, I've gotten that complaint, cold pizza. So is there something that could be done about that?
If it's the will of the board that I go out to bid, I can do that. But I can tell you that we serve over 100,000 breakfasts and lunch each month.
Yeah, and
that would happen generally, if you want me to go out to bid in March, to be effective on July 1st.
Okay. So make a motion to rebid, does that happen? Again,
Yeah, you're making
Brand new.
You're making a motion to direct the business office to go back out to bid for next school year.
okay, so can we do that?
Yeah.
Okay, I make the motion.
Can I have a second?
I'll
I second
that. Go ahead. Second.
Any discussion on this? Roll call, please.
Burns,
Yes.
Callie,
Our contract is year to year, right? We're not in any
Yes.
jeopardy of violating?
year to year, yes.
Okay. Yes.
DeCaro,
No.
Marqueta,
Yes.
Slade,
Yes.
Silikowski.
Yes.
Lent,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right.
Thank you,
Number
guys.
two.
Thank you. You guys are, I appreciate it. And I'm sure the students are going to appreciate it more. All right, so the next one is, of course, so let's talk Constitution. The 1947 state constitution says New Jersey's current state constitution, Article 1, rights and privileges. All persons are by nature free and independent and have certain natural and unalienable rights, among which are those of enjoying and defending life and liberty, of acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and of pursuing and obtaining safety and happiness. The word liberty is defined in the dictionary as the state of not being imprisoned or enslaved. With the governor's mandates, again, like we discussed earlier, clearly people, I understand it's for the safety, and I'm not going to get into the discussion of whether they work or not. There's two sides to science. I don't want to get I don't want to get involved with that. So I don't want to say if they work or they don't work. I just want to put a motion for next week to vote to send a letter to Trenton stating that the Old Bridge Board of Education does not agree with the governor taking away what is constitutionally ours, the right to choose. I would like to just, again, I don't want to make it a red versus blue. I don't want to make it a yes and no. I don't want to make it that. I want to make it it's a freedom thing, right? So when it comes to everything else, it's when you give a little bit, you lose a lot. So the freedoms that we once knew, the freedoms that we grew up with in this great country, right now are in jeopardy for the younger generation. So what I would like to do is just tell the governor that we do not agree with it. I would like to put that to send a letter to Trenton for next week's meeting to be voted on.
Didn't we do this?
Yeah, we did this already.
Thank you.
There's already a resolution that was passed.
Just a couple months ago.
Yeah.
And it went on and on
Long
for a
time.
couple of meetings.
Very long
And then
time.
was drafted, redrafted, and redrafted. Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Did we send a letter?
Yes, we did.
You did send a letter this past fall. You can send a different or differently worded letter. Have the new board members, have the three of you seen that letter? Have you guys seen it?
I saw one that was sent out by all the superintendents in the Middlesex district.
No, this one was sent from the Old Bridge Board of Ed.
Mr. Marquette, if you were at those meetings, you would have heard that conversation, Mr. Dunn. Remember when Mr. Dunn had
Yes,
the
ma'am,
resolution?
I was at those meetings.
Okay.
I was there. I heard them.
Right. Mhm.
I heard them.
So that was voted on. Do
I
you
understand, but that was, what was voted on then, the resolution that Mr. Dunn was passing was basically watered down to basically nothing, because the board at the time did not think that the board having their control of whether or not they should allow the students to lose their freedom of deciding to wear a mask or not was important.
Well, because we're a public school, Mr. Marquette.
Yes, I understand
And we
that.
have to follow the laws and mandates of the state. We already follow a lot of laws and mandates from the state. So we can't pick and choose which mandates we want to abide by or not. Do you realize that, right?
Yes, I understand that. But again, it's something that needs to be told, I would say. It's something that needs to be spoken to and let the person know that we do not agree with him doing what he's doing to our children.
but we already have that resolution that was sent to Governor Murphy.
So then let's do another one.
I agree.
Why?
I say we could do a second one. It doesn't hurt to do a second one, and going back and forth doesn't benefit anyone here, especially speaking down to each other doesn't benefit anyone,
I'm
so
not
I
speaking
suggest we
down
just
to
do a second
anyone,
one.
Mrs. Lent. I'm just trying to understand what Mr. Marqueta is asking, and I think he's
I'm asking the board
he's
to band together
redoing
for the cause of the
conversation
children.
that
ma'am.
we spent many, many months discussing.
I understand that, but I wasn't on the board then, so I would like to discuss it now.
Can we use the same wording or have the last letter there for discussion? Instead of voting on it now, can we bring it up as discussion and have the past resolution available to use it as like framework?
It might be useful to send that letter to all board members in the next couple days, or, tomorrow, and use that as a starting point. But to Mr. Marqueta's question, if it's the will of the board, you can send a letter every week. The fact that you have sent one does not bar you from sending another one, but that's your call as a body.
So now I have a question, Chris. So obviously, they said if you did go against the Murphy mandate, right, you lose funds, right? That's the thing here. You lose funds.
You're talking about the masking and vaccination?
Yeah, so the masking in general. So I remember when Mr. Dunn was trying to bring it up, he said they said that if we did do away with it, they can cut the state funding.
Your funding is always at some level of discretion coming out of Trenton.
I understand. I get that.
For whatever reason.
But now, is that all that can be done if we did in fact decide to tell the governor that we did not agree with it? And maybe if we voted, again, so I know mandate, but.
Mr. Martin, I think there is, and something we've discussed, is a certain level of liability and legal consequence that could happen that I think, because it's a liability of the district, it's probably something you'd better off discussing in executive session.
As far as the liability issues, we can talk about it in executive session. As far as would you bring attention to the district positively or negatively, that's more of a public question. And again, the sending of a second letter at all, that's a question for the board. The content of the letter, that's a question for the board.
Mm-hmm.
So it's whatever the board's pleasure is. You wouldn't want to say anything illegal in it, but you wouldn't. If you're saying similar to what Mr. Dunn originally proposed, saying send a stronger letter, yeah, that's certainly something that the board can choose to do.
I'm going to go along with Lisa on this, her recommendation. She wasn't on the board when that letter was originally sent out, so I think it should be reworked if we're going to rework it and send it again.
But I thought the recommendation was to just send the actual resolution to the new board members so that they had a chance to read it.
Is that a good starting point? Everybody takes a look at the letter and bring it up for discussion next week? At that point, you decide, I don't like this part of it, I want to add this something in, and we go from there.
I'll do that. Again, it's compromise, right? So I'll compromise. But I would like to send our own letter, considering that we're new on the board and we're fresh. And I think, again, I'll compromise. I got no problem compromising. But
Yeah, I'm not saying that you have to use letter, I'm just saying, so you're going from a point of, there's no redundancy, there's a fresh look at it, and this is the new board's perspective, and this is what we said before. Now, what parts do we want to strengthen, and what parts do we want to know we already sent without sending the same thing?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm okay with that.
I agree with that. I haven't seen it, so I can't comment one way or the other. I would like to take a look at it and then figure out what's what from there.
So then, no action is necessary tonight, but we have consensus that the old letter, the first letter, will be sent to all board members, including Mr. Giordano and Mr. Weber, and then it'll be for discussion under old business next week.
Okay, thank you.
That's acceptable, Mr. Marquez?
That's acceptable, yes, thank you. Appreciate it. Now, what would happen in the case of so we decided, let's just say, again hypothetically, we decided to go optional with the masks, right? Take away the mandate, and then other townships had joined in with us. What would the governor at that point he would sue all 3 districts?
You would all be agreeing to break a law.
Understood.
So what could happen? I don't know.
But is the word mandate?
Excuse me?
The word mandate doesn't necessarily mean law.
It doesn't necessarily mean the same thing.
Right.
But an executive order is a law. And these executive orders that were passed today extend the mask requirement.
Understood.
Whether we call it a mandate, a law, or a requirement, as of right now, it's legally required that you wear it.
Understood. So now, can you perhaps maybe explain to the public what the Senate and Assembly could do to take this away from the governor? Can they do anything to do that, to take it away?
No, not at this stage. There were 2, as of just yesterday, there were 2 active discussions apparently going on. One was that the governor was asking both houses of the legislature to support an extension for 90 days of all of these executive orders. Again, for our purposes, the mask and the vaccination or test requirement.
Right.
That was a discussion that was going on. There was some talk about saying 90 days isn't going to fly, but maybe 45. That didn't work out. Neither house of the legislature even voted on it, so there was no support there, which led to Governor Murphy taking his other option, which was to issue another executive order.
Right.
So the executive order comes with the office. He does have the authority to do it. So at this point, there's nothing the legislature can do to block or overrule the masking mandate.
Okay.
The third body of your government, which is your court system, can review it. And as you know, there have been complaints filed, and there is litigation ongoing with that.
Yes.
But as of right now, the courts have not said anything other than that there was no basis to interrupt or interfere with the mask mandate. So it is the law of the state at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's good just to educate people also, so like that maybe they understand what's going on fully. So.
Any other new business?
Nope, I'm done. I just want to say that, thank you to the board for at least having an open discussion next week. So thank you.
Okay, so we'll close new business. We do not have an executive session?
You do not.
Okay, so do I have someone to move for adjournment?
Burns will move for adjournment.
Second?
Callie will move.
All in favor?
All in favor? Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay.
Abstention? We are done at 9:08.